안녕하세요. 주식한스푼입니다. 최근 한화오션이 신고가 15만원을 찍은 뒤 조정을 받고 있습니다. 기업의 가치나 모멘텀과는 별개로 시장에서 AI 버블, 미국 셧다운, 금리 동결 같은 이슈들이 겹치면서 공포감이 커졌고 그 영향으로 한화오션도 함께 조정을 받은 상황입니다. 하지만 걱정하지 않으셔도 됩니다. 지난번에도 제가 12만원 고점 돌파를 말씀드렸던 것처럼 이번에도 새로 형성된 15만원 고점을 다시 도전하러 올라갈 것입니다. 다만 올라갈 때는 욕심을 부리지 말고 반드시 수익 실현을 하셔야 합니다. 아무리 좋은 주식이라도 계속 오르기만 하는 종목은 없기 때문입니다. 한화오션 같은 우량주는 조정 시 매수, 상승 시 수익 실현을 반복하는 전략으로 상승 추세가 완전히 꺾이기 전까지 대응하시면 됩니다. 그렇다면 왜 한화오션이 새 고점을 돌파할 수밖에 없는지 또 하나의 이유를 말씀드리겠습니다. 여러 번 강조드렸듯이 현재 미국 조선업계는 심각한 위기 상황입니다. 너무 열악해서 동맹국 협력이 필수적인 상황이죠. 얼마 전 미국 상무부가 대한민국 빅3 조선사로부터 사업 제안서를 받아갔습니다. 이 제안서에 대한 답변과 구체적인 협력 방안은 내년 1월 20일부터 23일까지 나흘간 미국 메릴랜드 내셔널 하버에서 열리는 셀렉트USA 투자서밋’에서 논의될 예정입니다. 그 자리에서 호재성 뉴스가 다수 발표될 것입니다. 그 시기 주가 많이 올라 있으면 욕심 너무 부리지 마시고 수익 실현 해두시고 다시 조정받을 때 매수 전략으로 반복하시면 됩니다. 자, 이에 대해 더 말씀드리기 전에 미국 조선업계가 현재 얼마나 심각한 상황인지 미 해군 유튜버 전문가 영상을 하나 시청하겠습니다.
On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, U.S. shipbuilding is... I can't say that in the first 15 seconds of a YouTube video. Or I get in trouble with YouTube. I see. Hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So we're going to talk about how screwed up U.S. shipbuilding is. I obviously can't use this word or for fear of being demonetized by the big powers at YouTube. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what is going on with shipbuilding. Now, you may remember Sal being very optimistic and very happy about this shipbuilding offensive that was initiated by the Trump administration. We had an executive order. We had issues come out from Congress with things like the SHIPS Act. We had the U.S. Trade Representative and their Section 301. Well, we've seemed to hit a couple of bumps here along the way. Not surprising, not really surprising. We did not expect this to be a smooth rollout. But there have been a lot of hurdles that have been thrown up, and I think it's a good time to take a moment and reflect on them and see where we currently are. Then you get a chain of horror stories. So this one from Mallory Shelbourne over at USNI News. Carrier John F. Kennedy delivery delayed 2 years. Fleet will drop to 10 carriers for 1 year. So the Ford-class carriers that are replacing the Nimitz-class, now we have 10 Nimitz-class carriers. The Ford took a long time to build. She is just deployed on her second deployment over to the Mediterranean. The Kennedy is the follow-up ship. That ship was laid down. Now, this ship is not going to be ready now, not in 2025, but in 2027. That ship was laid down, started construction in 2015. 12 years to build this ship. Now, the reason Kennedy is so delayed for a variety of reasons, you have COVID, obviously, was a big issue, but more importantly, they robbed from Kennedy to finish the Ford. And so a lot of the components and issues that they needed to get on this. This, however, is a problem. It took 10 years to get Ford up and running. It's taking 12 years to get Kennedy up and running. It's going to take at least 8 years to get Enterprise, then follow-on carrier up and running. There's no way you maintain 11 fleet carriers out there if you are building one every 10 to 12 years. There's just no way. This is a major problem for the U.S. Add to it, we're seeing the same thing on the big deck amphibs that are being built also by Huntington Ingalls, but this time down in Pascagoula, not Newport News. Both the Fallujah and the Bougainville are going to be delayed. Now, these big deck amphibs are absolutely essential. They need them. The Marine Corps need them to be able to deploy the Marine Corps. Plus, we are already down a big deck amphib because we allowed Bonhomme Richard to burn up in San Diego Harbor back in 2020 because the Navy doesn't have proper firefighting equipment staged in their bases to prevent a shipboard fire. One thing that I hop on, along with John Conrad, a lot about is there's no friggin' fireboats in the major Navy ports. Then the Trump administration just canceled some of the offshore patrol cutters at the Eastern Shipbuilding over delays and rising costs. So the Coast Guard is undergoing a fleet replacement program. They're replacing their old 210 and 270-foot medium endurance cutters. The 210s are over 50 years old, probably about 60 years old now, some of them. And these new offshore patrol cutters, about 25 of them, are going to be the replacement for them. They started building them at Eastern Shipbuilding in Panama City, Florida. This is the largest build that Eastern had ever done. They had never built anything of this scope and scale before. They had built fireboats and tugs, but nothing the size of a medium-sized warship. And they got hit by a hurricane, but more importantly, Eastern Shipbuilding was just in a lot of trouble building this. And what we've seen now is that the third and the fourth hull of the ship is being canceled. This is the launch of the first ship, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Argus. I want you to note something here. Where Eastern built this was on a dirt field. I mean, there's dirt there. I mean, this gives you an idea of the nature of that shipyard. Now, Eastern suffered a lot from the hurricane. They were challenged because of the scope and scale of this, but the construction contract was awarded over to Austal in Mobile, and they have started building more. They've got basically the second phase of these cutters, but it's probably not going to see a lot of these cutters come operational anywhere near the time frame envisioned. At the same time, the U.S. government has canceled the 11th National Security Cutter being built over at Huntington Ingalls. This was an add-on to the original order by the Coast Guard. Coast Guard wanted 10 National Security Cutters. This cutter was ordered. It was paid for. Equipment had been procured for it. Now they are not going to build it. I have a lot of questions about this one, why this cutter is being canceled. I think they should have built it. They had everything there. There were delays in getting it built. Basically, this cutter had low priority because HII in Pascagoula was diverting resources over to the building of Burke-class destroyers, LPDs, and to the large deck amphibs. However, I think this last cutter could have been brought into the Coast Guard, could have been brought into the Navy as a potential frigate, since we're not getting the Constellation. But again, it just demonstrates problems with shipbuilding in the U.S. You have a GA report on Navy shipbuilding and ship repair, and I could just highlight the issues here. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into this. Mainly, we don't have enough repair facilities, and the repair facilities we do have are overwhelmed by the Navy because the Navy can never get their ships in on time. The scope of work changes every time, and that throws the entire repair cycle off, not the least of which, too, is that they depend on small contractors and small manufacturers for a lot of replacement parts, and that creates a supply chain bottleneck. Same thing, GAO report on surface ship maintenance. I mean, when you look at the surface ship Navy, you get this story. GAO, Navy wasted $1.84 billion in repairs to cruisers cut from the fleet. The Navy and cruisers have been a disaster. We built 27 Ticonderoga class cruisers. We got rid of the cruisers without the VLS, the vertical launch cells. That brought us down to 22. 22 is a great number because that gives you 2 cruisers with each of the 11 carriers. Well, you don't really need 2 cruisers, you just need 1. So we went down to 11, and then the decision was to go down to 7, and now we're down to 3, and we're going to get rid of those 3 too. But the amount of money, USS Gettysburg, for example, or Anzio as depicted here, are cruisers where we've just have been holes in the water we've thrown money into. You also have stories like this. The poor material condition of Navy amphib fleet prevents Marine deployments, training, says the GAO. I mean, if you look at the big deck amphibs, the recent deployment or attempted deployment of the USS Boxer is a case in point. I, for the life of me, don't understand why the Boxer, which tried to deploy, had a rudder failure, came back into San Diego, and they had to fix that repair in the water. There was not a dry dock available to pull the Boxer into. I want to know, what was the dry dock availability at Pearl Harbor and Puget Sound, the 2 Navy shipyards? The Navy still operates 4 public shipyards. They're largely allocated for nuclear vessels, obviously submarines and aircraft carriers. However, one of the reasons you have these dry docks at Puget Sound and Pearl Harbor is to provide rapid repair in time of war. Why was it Boxer could not been brought up to Puget Sound or Pearl Harbor, put in a dry dock and repaired, akin to what we did with USS Yorktown, before the Battle of Midway in 1942? If we can't do that in peacetime, how are we going to do this in wartime? Okay. things are bad in shipbuilding. I mean, they look bad. I mean, just things don't seem to be going quite the way we want them to. But hey, there's hope on the horizon. I mean, again, we just had the introduction of the SHIPS Act over in Congress. But the good thing is we know that shipbuilding is a priority. We keep hearing that. The president says it, everybody says it. There's a massive priority for it. And we have a huge program out there that is trying to get workers into the workforce. Just watch Mike Rowe give a talk where he's talking about that. I keep getting called about more workers in the workforce. I would argue what needs to happen here, and ironically it doesn't deal with shipbuilding, is we need to get ships in the fleet. We need to get boats out there. I mean, it's what we need. We need to start showing that we're seeing an uptick in numbers in both the Navy and Coast Guard, but also in the commercial fleet. And there is some prospect for that. So, for example, Hanwha is moving to reflag Korean-built LNG carriers under the U.S. flag. One of the things that John Conrad noted in his tweet, and also came out in the Reuters story, you have people like Rudolf Sade, the president of CMA CGM, who came to the White House, is offering $20 billion to invest in U.S. shipping. He wants to invest in shipyards. He wants to reflag vessels from the CMA CGM fleet into the U.S. flagged APL fleet, the old American President's line. But he doesn't know who to talk to because there's nobody in charge. And here's a move. Hanwha wants to move and reflag Korean-built LNG carriers under the U.S. flag. But to get them into the U.S. flag, which isn't a problem, it's easy to reflag, you've got to make them, first off, you got to make sure they're profitable, which means they're going to need to be an offset for the higher waged U.S. crews, and there needs to be priority cargo. There needs to be cargo. It means cargo preference. It means you have to haul X amount or X percentage of liquefied natural gas on U.S. flagged vessels.
영상에서 보신 것처럼 현재 미국 조선 업황은 여러 문제에 직면해 있습니다. 전투함 건조 계획의 축소 및 종료, 인도 지연, 해양경비대 신형 함정의 지연까지 겹치며 사항은 갈수록 어려워지고 있습니다. 이러한 현실 속에서 미 해군은 동맹국인 우리 대한민국의 도움이 절대적으로 필요합니다. 조선 3사가 미국에 제출한 사업 계획서의 결과는 오는 2026년 1월 20일부터 23일까지 나흘간 미국 메릴랜드 내셔널 하버에서 열리는 셀렉트USA 투자서밋’에서 윤곽이 드러날 것으로 예상됩니다. 이 행사는 미국 상무부가 주최하는 최대 규모의 투자 박람회로 올해는 특별히 조선업 투자 라운드 테이블이 마련되어 더욱 주목받고 있습니다. 한국 측에서는 한화오션 사장, HD 한국조선해양 의장, 산업통상자원부 고위 관계자가 참석하며 미국 측에서는 상무부 장관 하워드 러트닉, 알래스카 주지사 마이크 던리비, 그리고 미 NSC 및 해군성 주요 관계자가 함께합니다. 이번 회동은 한국 조선업계가 제출한 제안서에 대한 미국 측 검토 결과를 공유하고 구체적인 협력 방안을 논의하는 자리입니다. 핵심 의제는 미국 내 조선업 투자, 군함 건조 정비 협력, 공급망 강화입니다. 특히 트럼프 행정부가 강조하는 미 해양 지배력 강화, 횡령 명령과 맞물려 한국 조선소들의 미국 진출 여부가 본격적으로 결정될 가능성이 큽니다. 한국 조선업계가 미국 시장에서 추진할 전략은 크게 세 가지로 정리할 수 있습니다. 첫째, 군함과 MRO 협력입니다. 미국은 중국과의 해군력 경쟁으로 군함 확보와 유지 보수 능력이 절실한 상황입니다. 한국은 이지스 구축함 등 고부가 가치 함정을 건조한 경험과 빠른 생산 속도를 갖추고 있기 때문에 미국 해군 함정의 정비와 공동 건조에 참여한다면 미국 조선업 재건 사업과 직접 연결될 수 있습니다. 둘째, LNG 운반선과 상선 시장입니다. 미국은 LNG 수출 확대 정책을 추진하면서 운반선 수요가 급증하고 있습니다. 한국은 세계 최고 수준의 LNG 운반선 건조 기술을 보유하고 있기 때문에 미국 LNG 산업과 연계해 선박을 공급하면 에너지 공급망 안정화에 크게 기여할 수 있습니다. 마지막으로 미국 내 생산과 투자 확대입니다. 미국은 바이 아메리카 정책과 번스 톨리스법으로 외국 조선소의 직접 참여를 제한하고 있습니다. 따라서 한국 기업은 한화오션처럼 현지 투자와 생산을 확대하는 방식으로 규제에 대응해야 합니다. 마지막으로 미국 조선업과 해군 장관 존 펠러의 메시지를 중심으로 한 영상을 올려드리면서 전 물러가도록 하겠습니다. 핵심 메시지를 요약하자면 미국 조선업은 국가 안보와 해군력 유지에 필수적이며 중국은 매년 수십 척의 군함을 건조하지만 미국은 속도가 크게 뒤처져 있다. 한국 등 동맹국의 조선 기술과 투자 사례는 미국이 배워야 할 중요한 자산이라는 내용입니다. 그 외에 리토를 전투함 프로그램 종료, 산업용 선박 건조 계획 축소, 해양경비대 신형 함정 지연, 민간 조선소 투자 철회. 결국 미국은 조선업을 지켜내야 하고 동맹국가의 협력이 필수이며 시도된 사업과 지연된 프로젝트는 경고이자 교훈이라는 강력한 메시지를 주는 영상입니다. 지금까지 살펴본 것처럼 한화오션은 탄탄한 펀더멘털을 기반으로 매출과 영업이익을 해마다 꾸준히 성장시키며 새로운 분야에도 선도적으로 진출하고 있습니다. 대한민국 조선업계를 이끌어가는 진정한 선두주자라 할 수 있으며 일시적인 조정이 있더라도 걱정하실 필요는 없습니다. 시청해주셔서 감사드리며 저는 여기서 인사드리겠습니다. 즐겁고 편안한 주말 보내시길 바랍니다.
To the Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan.
As I said in my confirmation hearing and in my first message to the fleet, I will not spend a single taxpayer dollar unless it contributes directly to readiness and our ability to defeat future threats. Every dollar we save must go back into readiness. To keep that promise and meet this moment, we are reshaping how the Navy builds and fields its fleet. Today, I can announce the first major public action in this reshaping.
Well, hang on there a second, Mr. Secretary. Before we jump into your big Thanksgiving announcement, which I assure you is going to be fantastic for the history of the Navy and build upon this great Thanksgiving Day of American shipbuilding, let's take a look at stories leading up to this announcement. I think it'll be really good to kind of set the mood for the announcement that Secretary Phelan is about to give us. So, our first story takes us over to Mike Scholler over at G-Captain. The Navy has commissioned its final Independence-class littoral combat ship as the Trouble program winds down. So the U.S. Navy has commissioned USS Pierre, the 19th and final Independence variant of the littoral combat ship, on Friday in Panama City, Florida, marking the end of a program that has struggled to meet its original mission objectives. Secretary of the Navy John Phelan delivered the principal address at the ceremony, emphasizing the administration's commitment to maritime power despite the program's troubled history. Quote, President Trump is committed to restoring our shipbuilding capacity because he knows that to be a superpower, one must be a sea power. The commissioning comes as the Navy officially winds down the LCS program after mounting evidence that the vessel cannot reliably perform their intended mission. Originally conceived in 2002 as fast modular ships capable of mine countermeasures, anti-submarine warfare, and surface warfare operations in littoral zones, the LCS fleet has instead become defined by chronic mechanical failures, underperforming mission modules, and limited survivability. Okay, maybe not the best story to start off on our celebration of American shipbuilding here with a program of 35 ships that has had some problems. I'll admit that it hasn't been great. We've had a couple of hurdles in the program. I mean, the Freedom class had that whole combining gear issue where the ships couldn't go very fast, which is kind of what they were designed to do. The Independence class had those kind of hull fractures, which that's not great. And then the mission modules that were supposed to be interchangeable were not really interchangeable, and one of them, the anti-submarine one, never worked, and we're just getting the minesweeping one now, so we really only have one module, and then they were designed for really small crews, and they have two different crews rotating off, but now we're down to one really big crew, and so everything's not great with that. Okay. But still, we're getting up for a big announcement by the Secretary of the Navy here on shipbuilding. Let's go over to our second story. I'm sure that'll be better. Story number 2, the GAO, the Government Accounting Office report, has exposed severe problems plaguing the U.S. Coast Guard's offshore patrol cutter program, with both shipbuilders failing to deliver any vessels despite years of construction and program costs ballooning to $17.6 billion. The GAO investigation found that the Coast Guard strategy of building ships before completing their designs has proven disastrous. The report states that the construction of OPCs 1 through 4 began without a stable design, contrary to shipbuilding leading practices, which led to rework which delayed deliveries. OPC's 1 delivery had been pushed back more than 5 years, from June 2023 to at least late 2026. Concerningly, the Stage 2 contractor, +USA, appears to be following the same troubled path. According to the GAO, construction of OPC 5 began in August 2024 without a stable design. The report warns that continuing to build additional Stage 2 vessels before stabilizing design increases the risk that Stage 2 will also encounter costly rework and schedule delays. Okay, this is a bit concerning. I'm not sure, but is that dirt where they're building the ship? That looks like dirt. That doesn't look like paved ground where they're building the ship. This is... Okay, all right, I'm a little concerned here. I mean, we're finally finishing up the plagued LCS program. The Coast Guard's OPC program, all right, it's delayed, but I mean, at least we're building ships. I mean, that's good to know. All right, let's go to our third story. Story number 3, Eastern Shipbuilding suspends work on Coast Guard offshore patrol cutter program. Oh, for the love of God. Seriously? Eastern Shipbuilding has announced the suspension of work on U.S. Coast Guard's 2 offshore patrol cutters, citing unsustainable financial pressures and workforce reductions as the company struggles with what CEO Joey Desaneria describes as, quote, significant financial strain caused by the program's structure and conditions. Seriously? All right. What does this mean? According to Desaneria, quote, unfortunately, we also had to reduce our workforce, an extremely hard step as our people are the strength of this company. This action allows us to remain financially stable and focused on delivering for our government and commercial customers, unquote. Eastern Shipbuilding was originally awarded the contract to design and construct the first 4 OPCs in 2016 as part of what was planned as a larger 9-ship procurement. However, the program encountered significant obstacles when Hurricane Michael severely damaged the company's Panama City facility in 2018, forcing contract modifications, dividing the program into 2 stages. According to a senior Homeland Security official, quote, we cannot allow critical shipbuilding projects to languish over budget and behind schedule. Our Coast Guard needs modern, capable vessels to safeguard our national economic security. Okay, hang on a second. Eastern Shipbuilding has never built a ship of this size before. Everybody knew this going in here. The biggest they had built prior to this was a couple of ferries. They had also built the fireboat for New York City. Everybody knew that building the OPCs at Eastern was going to be a problem. And yes, Hurricane Michael upset everything. And yes, COVID upset everything. But it's not that. But now Eastern has canceled the 3rd and 4th hull so that they can just finish the first 2. Meanwhile, over at Austal Marine, the Coast Guard's program has been directed to Austal, which received the contract in June of 2022 to build up to 11 OPCs with a potential value of $3.3 billion. In September, the Coast Guard exercised options for the contract worth $314 million for 3 additional cutters. But work on the first OPC, the Pickering, is progressing with keel laying scheduled for December, while construction of the second vessel, Icarus, began in early August. The goal is to procure 25 ships. I'm beginning to wonder if we're going to get any ships right now. This is not good. I mean, we're not doing great here. I'll admit that right off the bat. Things are not looking good. But again, we're building up here to Secretary Phelan's announcement, which is going to be great because it's Thanksgiving and you would want to announce something great on Thanksgiving. All right, let's go to story number 4. Story number 4, an unprecedented Pentagon threat has erupted just as Washington attempts its boldest shipbuilding revival in decades, raising doubts about whether the administration's maritime strategy can survive its own political turbulence. The Pentagon's extraordinary threat to recall Senator Mark Kelly to active duty for prosecution has raised new doubts about the Trump administration's maritime revival agenda, coming just weeks after the suspension of port fees, widely viewed as central to that strategy. On November 24th, the Pentagon said it was reviewing serious allegations of misconduct against Kelly, a retired Navy captain and Arizona senator, after he and 5 other military veteran Democrats urged U.S. troops to refuse unlawful orders. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth accused the group of sedition, calling their video, quote, despicable, reckless, and false for encouraging other warriors to ignore the orders of the commander. The political clash comes at a pivotal moment for the domestic maritime industry. Kelly is one of the Senate's leading advocates for rebuilding American shipbuilding capacity alongside Senator Todd Young, Republican of Indiana. He co-sponsored the Ships for America Act, reintroduced in April 2025, which aims to revitalize the U.S. shipbuilding industry and expand the America-flagged commercial fleet. The act proposes a strategic commercial fleet program to expand the U.S. fleet to 250 ships, 100% U.S. flag requirements for all government cargo, and new cargo preference rules requiring some commercial goods from China to move on U.S. vessels starting in 2030. The Kelly controversy also follows the November 10 suspension of U.S. Trade Representatives' maritime targeted Section 301 port fees, paused for 1 year. As part of a Trump-Xi trade agreement, the fees had been in place for less than a month. You're kidding, right? You're going to court-martial the guy who's one of the co-sponsors for the SHIPS Act that is trying to rebuild U.S. shipbuilding. Oh. Okay, not going to lie. Not shaping up to be the best Thanksgiving I'd hoped for. All right. Brings us to our last story. We're banking on Secretary Phelan to have a substantial announcement here that is going to revive shipbuilding and be the outlet that we need here for this Thanksgiving Day. Over to you, Secretary Phelan.
Today, I can announce the first major public action in this reshaping, a strategic shift away from the Constellation-class frigate program. The Navy and our industry partners have reached a comprehensive framework that terminates, for the Navy's convenience, the last 4 ships of the class, which have not begun construction. We greatly value the shipbuilders of Wisconsin and Michigan. While work continues on the first 2 ships, those ships remain under review as we work through this strategic shift.
Oh. May need to keep this close by. So, the U.S. Navy has decided to cancel construction of the Constellation class, canceling the last 4 ships, only building 2 ships, just to keep Fincantieri afloat long enough until we can figure out another type of ship that we can be built. Just to remind everybody of the Constellation class, this frigate was supposed to be the kind of building block between the littoral combat ships and the Arleigh Burke class destroyers. It was designed to fill that mission role for escorting ships, really being a jack of all trades, for a vessel just short of what we needed an Arleigh Burke destroyer for. Because understand, while we're still building Arleigh Burke destroyers in Pascagoula and Bath Iron, we're going to start retiring them at a rate faster than we're building them, which means we're going to lose more ships. And without building the frigate, which was a French-designed Frem frigate, the concept of the frigate was that we'll buy a design off the shelf and it'll be faster to build. However, what happened was the Navy Sea Systems Command decided to change 85%. Yes, 85% of the design, which means that you might as well have designed a brand new ship, because nothing has really been done on it. The first ship was slated for delivery in April 2026. That is 6 months from now. The new delivery date is April, not 2026, 2027. Not 2028. You guessed it. April of 2029. A 36-month delay is in it. And the only reason we're building 2 of the ships has got to be to keep Fincantieri afloat. That's the only thing I can think of. Now, if we were building, I don't know, lake freighters up on the Great Lakes to replace the 40 to 50-year-old Great Lakes vessels that are up there, maybe they would have some shipyard work to do. But instead, we're just absolutely building... Oh, God.